Good morning, dear students. Today we will continue the topic synthetic drugs and dyes. In last lecture, we had seen the synthesis of remaining drugs, and those drugs were tolbutamide, then benzocaine, paracetamol, aspirin, sulfanilamide, and other drugs also we had seen. Today we are going to learn synthetic dyes. What is meant by dye? That is very important. And then, what is meant by synthetic dyes? Okay, as you see, the colors in nature, many substances are colored. Out of those, most of the colors are obtained from dyes and pigments. So, a dye is a substance that imparts color to the material. The material may be either cloth, leather, or paper. The dye is a substance that imparts color to the material. When we say anyone has a red colored shirt, orange colored shirt, blue colored shirt, it means either any of colors dye has been applied to the cotton or terylene or terracotta. So, a dye is a substance that impart color to the cloth. Also, there are many dyes that impart color to the leather and paper also. Now these dyes are resistant to heat, light, or any other factors that affects to the strength of the dye. So the dye should not wash away after washing. It should not fade away after washing, heat, or light. So the dyes are very important in our day-to-day life to another colored compound is pigments. Both are coloring materials, but the dyes differ from pigments. The dyes differ from pigments. The pigments wash away, but dyes do not easily wash away. Also, there is one another difference. Most of the dyes are organic compounds, while the pigments are organic or inorganic compounds. So, remind this difference between dyes and pigments. Now, the next is qualities of a good dye. What are the qualities of a good dye? As you saw in drugs, there are some conditions that can be satisfied by a good drug. Satisfied by a good drug. Also, there are some conditions that can be satisfied by a good dye. And the first condition is it should not be toxic. It means a dye should not harm to the host, so that it must be non-toxic. The second thing is it should be cheap and easily available. The dye should be cheap and easily available because the cheapness is the major characteristic of any product, so that it could be easily available or it can afford anybody, so that the dye should be easily available and cheap. Then next is it should fix itself to fabric. It should fix itself to fabric. Now see, when you are applying a dye to a cloth, at that time it should not require any other medium such as mordants or any other fasteners. It should easily fasten to the cloth. It should easily fasten to the cloth, so that it gives a better color to the cloth. The next is it must resist to action of water, acid, alkali, etc. It should not happen that you applied a dye to the cloth and after washing the dye has been washed away. It should not happen. The dye must fix to the cloth, so that it can resist the attacks of acid, water or alkali or any other washing material or dry cleaning materials. Also, it should not wash away with the use of detergents. It means it should be resistant to detergents also. The next is it should have better fastness and high color strength. As I said earlier, it should tightly fasten to the cloth and must have a high color according to the cloth. It could be intense or low. The color should be good for the cloth. The next is it should be fabric friendly. It means it should not harm to the cloth. There are many dyes which when applied to cloth, leather or paper, at that time they decrease the strength of the fabric or paper or leather. So it should not happen when we apply the dyes. All these were the characteristics of a good dye. And next point is types of dyes. Look at these different dyes. There are many dyes: yellow, red, orange, green, blue. All those are dyes. Also, the dyes have been classified into different categories based on their characteristic structures and properties or their sources. And the very first dye is acid dye. And the very first dye is acid dye. An acid dye is a dye which contains one or more sulfonic acid substituents or other acidic groups. This dye is a water soluble dye, and this is also known as anionic dye. This acidic dye contains at least one or more sulfonic acid substituents in its structure, or any other acidic group must be present in its structure. As this dye is ionic, this dye is soluble in water, and the example is yellow 36. And the example is yellow 36. The next dye is basic dye. These are derived from coal tar. These are coal tar derivatives used to color wool, silk, linen, hemp, etc. These dyes are also known as cationic dyes. As acidic dyes are known as anionic dyes, the basic dyes are known as cationic dyes. And these are initially obtained from coal tar. So these dyes fasten to the cloth or any material without use of any mordant. It means there is no need of mordant. And these basic dyes give better color or brilliant color with fastness to the acrylic fibers. It means these dyes are used for the intense colors or brilliant colors, and these are not easily washed away with water, sunlight, or detergents. And the example is brown one. The third one is direct dyes. These dyes are directly applied to the cloth or leather from an aqueous solution. It means there is no need of any other medium. Just make a aqueous solution of these direct dyes and apply it to the cloth, so that these are known as direct dyes. These dyes are most useful for fabrics which can form hydrogen bonds with the dyeing of fabrics. Now the clothes you wear that contains hydroxy groups, amino groups, and these groups can form hydrogen bonds with these dyes, and they tightly fasten to the cloth. The direct dyes are mainly basic dyes having azo linkage and high molecular weight. It means they contains N triple bond N azo linkage or N2 linkage, and they also have high molecular weight. The example is orange 26. The fourth dye is azo dyes. From its name, it is clear that these dyes contains azo group, that is N double bond N or N triple bond N plus negative. In these dyes, at least one azo group is directly attached to the aromatic ring, and these dyes are used mainly for bright red color in dyeing and printing. As you have seen, the synthesis of Congo red, that is also a azo dye, and these dyes are used for bright red color in dyeing and printing. The azo dye is also a bright red colored dye, and that is also an azo dye. The example is red azo dye, bluish red azo dye. or you may say Congo red. The next is nitrodyes. The nitrodyes are polynitro derivatives of phenols containing at least one nitro group at ortho or para position of hydroxyl group. And the example is meritus yellow. In nitrodyes, one or more nitro groups are present at ortho or para position of the hydroxy group. It means it could be a paranitrophenol, orthonitrophenol, any other dye. So the next is modern dyes. A compound that as binding agent between the fiber and dye are known as mordant. And the mordants are highly resistant to both light and wash, as this material binds the cloth and dye so that it is not easy to wash away this dye, and this dye is used to apply the colors to the clothes and leather. And these mordants act as a bridge between, or the connecting material between, the fiber and dye. These are resistant to light and wash, and the example is red 11. The next is reactive dyes. The dyes which react with cellulosic fiber to form a covalent bond are known as reactive dyes. As they form covalent bonds which are stronger, these reactive dyes fasten very well to the fabric and used to dye cotton, wool or silk. Used to dye cotton, wool or silk. These contain a reactive group which combines directly with the hydroxyl or amino group of fiber. In reactive dyes, at least one active site is there present that reacts with hydroxyl or amino group of the cloth or cellulose, that forms a covalent bond with the reactive dyes, and or that forms the covalent, at least one covalent bond with the hydroxyl or amino group of the fiber, so that the color is strong. It means the dye fastens very well and it is not easily washed away, or it do not fade away in the sunlight. And the example is blue 5 dye. Dye. The next dye is wet dyes. These dyes are insoluble complex polycyclic molecules based on the quinone structure. These are the derivatives of quinones. They contain polycyclic molecules, and these are also insoluble because this contains an organic material, so that it is insoluble in water, and these are not very well fastened to the cloth. So these may be washed away in the during the washings. So the wet dyes are made to form indigo, anthraquinone, quinone and carbazole. The indigo dye that is applied on the mainly denim jeans that is made from bad dyes, and that is the favorite of youth to wear a denim jeans, and that dye is red dye. And the example is indantine, and the example is indantine. So it was all about the synthetic dyes, their good characteristics, and classification of synthetic dyes. After looking into the all those points, now we will go for the next topic, that is color and constitution. We will continue in the next lecture. Up to that, thank you and good luck for your semester examinations.